The average solo GP is dead. Being handcuffed to a practice that only makes money while you're drilling crushes your freedom. Being trapped at the office is no way to experience life. And doing more fillings and crowns ain't the answer to freedom. Stop it. Freedom comes when your practice makes money without you. Freedom is choosing how many days and how you dental. Ready to forge your freedom? Then keep listening to become a super GP and super CEO. This is the Titanium Practice Podcast with your host, Dr. Stephen Freeman. Let's go.
Hello, all you beautiful people out there. Welcome to what's sure to be the best episode of the Titanium Practice Podcast yet. I'm your host and personal freedom coach, Dr. Stephen Freeman. How y'all doing today? I hope you're doing amazing. We've got another nugget episode, Titanium Nugget episode for you today about some ideas, some tips, some pearls, some takeaways of things that you can be doing to, in this case, place implants better. So one of the things that you do anytime you get into doing something a lot, you figure out things to do it a little bit faster, that work a little bit better. And I've definitely found a couple of things that I like to do and that I do every time that I place implants. And that's pretty much what we're going to be focused on here today, about ways for you to be able to do implants faster and better. And I got my little cheat sheet here today, so I am going to be looking down on it quite a bit. But one of the things that we do, some things that I always encourage you to do, is that every patient that gets an implant gets a night guard. And this was a huge one for me. I mean, there's so many things that the night guard's going to help out with. So when you think about the natural tooth, it's got the PDL around it. So the PDL acts as a natural shock absorber for when patients clench and grind. And it's amazing how much pressure and what our teeth actually have to put up with on a daily basis, that it's amazing that teeth don't fail more often. And yet, I mean, you could see teeth that, are clinically mobile for years and never have absolutely any problems. The patient's like, it's fine, no big deal. I had a lady who came in 15 years ago and her teeth were flapping in the wind. I sent her to the periodontist. She didn't want to do any of the periodontist stuff. And we went back and forth, but she hated how they look. She just hated how her teeth look. So she's like, I want to do veneers. She wanted to do 10 on top and 10 on the bottom. And she's like, if you don't do them, somebody else is going to do them. And so I kind of talked with the periodontist, talked with her back and forth about it. She said, that's fine. You don't need to do them. I'll just go somewhere else and somebody else will do them. And I said, eventually said, yeah, fine, I'll do them. This is 15 years ago, and I was pretty sure she was going to lose her teeth then. They're still hanging in there, and she's fine. But I think part of what it is that we made her get a night guard. And now whether or not she actually wears it or not, which I think she does because she brings it in when she gets her cleaning still, and it's, dirty and grimy. So I think she's wearing it. But that's the other part too, is they actually got to wear it. But as far as implants are concerned, natural teeth have that PDL in it. It acts as that shock absorber. Your implants don't have that. It's this constant pounding that they're taking that they don't get any relief from. And in my opinion, I think if you read it a lot of places, they're going to tell you that the number one reason an implant's going to fail is because of cement being left around the implant. And I might as well bring this up right now. I think it's lower down on my list of nuggets for you, but here's a nugget for you. What we do is our lab, we use almost exclusively stock abutments for posterior teeth. The only time we use custom abutments are potentially for bridges, and even then a lot of the time we'll use stock abutments. And the lab just preps the stock abutment. That's all they do. So they prep the stock abutment, and then what we do is we have them design a crown, and here's another nugget for you, with an access opening in top. Okay? So you have them prep a stock abutment, design a zirconia crown to go on top of that stock abutment, and have them design an access opening to the top of it. Okay? Then what you'll do is you'll actually have them cement the crown at the lab. So now you essentially have, a full one-piece abutment crown that you just bring to the patient's mouth, and there's no cement ever. And so there's no reason that any of your, especially posterior implants, because as I just said, we use custom abutment for the front, we almost always have to cement those, but your posterior implants should have no cement anywhere near it, and it should be a nice polished finish at that connection between the abutment and the actual crown. So some people say that's the number one reason that implants fail is because of that cement being left behind. In this case, I'm telling you right now, here's how you avoid that. So for me, the number one reason that I see implants fail is because of occlusion. It's occlusion. So when we have them make the crown, we make it slightly out of occlusion, okay? Just very slightly. And to be honest with you, a lot of the time when they come back from the lab, they still have to adjust the crown the same they would for any natural crown anyways as it is. So even calling it slightly out of occlusion, really at the end of the day, they're probably still inclusion. But I don't want them just solely hammering away on that implant because again, no PDL, so no shock absorber. So at some point in time, that implant basically kind of needs a break, needs a rest. So that's why we make every patient who's going to get an implant a night guard. And we explain to them why. Why is that? And, you know, obviously there's some patients who don't want to get it, but, you know, we tell them, well, tough. Like, this is what we're doing. This is what I believe in. And honestly, the vast majority of your general dentistry patients should have night guards anyways. There is so much malocclusion out there, it's ridiculous, okay? Your general dentistry patients should be getting night guards anyways. It's a tremendous revenue source as well. I mean, think about it. I mean, you get to charge a couple $100. My current lab fee is about $65 for a hard soft night guard. And we just got this 3D printer and I'm going to be able to print them for like $10 here soon. And it's almost all profit at that point in time. I'm really geeked about this 3D printer. I'm hoping it's as cool as I think it's going to be. But we make every patient get a night guard, whether they want to or not. And that's to protect their investment. And that's also to help us out as well of it being less likely being an issue of occlusion that is ultimately what causes potentially the implant to fail if that ends up what happens. You know, a lot of these people have such bad occlusion, they'll break the screw, the prosthetic screw holding the abutment into the implant. Other times they'll break the collar around the abutment and that gets basically cold welded inside of the implant. Oh man, it's a disaster. I mean, you want to talk about something that's going to ruin your day. And I don't say these things to scare you, but I want you to know why. Why is it that I tell everyone to get a night guard? Is because I don't want to have to deal with that. That is a no-win situation. I mean, I see it in not just my implants. The patients come in all the time from other doctors who they've broken their abutment. And if all it did is the prosthetic screw becomes loose, that's why you have the access opening. So you can just get back at that implant anytime you want to, heaven forbid, that prosthetic screw becomes loose. But when these situations happen where the actual abutment's broken and that little collar's broken around it, that is just a bad day for the patient. And so it's important to have some of these safety features. Okay, the night guard's a safety feature. The access openings, it's a safety feature. So you can try to get back at these things because since the implant's not going to move at all, there's got to be some give. There has to be flexure somewhere. And so if you just always have an immovable object, eventually it's going to break. It won't move, it'll just break. So it really doesn't happen that often, but I just want you to be aware of it, that it can happen, what you can do to prevent it from happening, and off you go. Another thing that I was literally just thinking about, and I don't think I have this in my list of nuggets, is if you don't want an implant on an island by itself. So let's say someone's missing number 30, but they've got an implant at 31, okay? You don't want that implant on an island. That you will see the implant itself fail, you will see the abutment break, or you will see that screw, like best case scenario in that is it will become loose. So as you start doing more implants, you become more comfortable. If you identify the fact that, let's say, this patient's got almost perfect dentition, minus the fact we've had some problems on the lower right-hand side in the past. They lost 31, they've got an implant there, and now the root canal has failed at 30, and they got to lose that. okay? If you're the one that plays 31, or if there's an access opening, or talk to the patient about why you'd want to do it, my recommendation would be take the crown off of it. Because let's say you have to extract 30, and then you're waiting, so you're going to extract 30. There's going to be a graft that's going to take 3 months. The implant's going to take 3 months. And then we always tell the patient it's going to take about 3 weeks to get the abutment and crown back from the lab. That's almost 7 months that number 31 is just going to be hammered on all by itself. And I've seen it time and time again where something happens to that implant. They do not like being by themselves. Now, it can be the most terminal tooth. If there's something directly in front of it, that's fine. But there needs to be something around it. But there's something about an implant being on an island by itself that will cause something bad to happen. And a lot of the times it's the implant itself that will fail. Not necessarily fracture and break, but just the bones, I'm done with it. And you'll just see the recession around it. Just the bone move away from it. And it's a nightmare for the patient. So if you explain to them why, now you're going to charge them. And you're going to charge them more if they don't have an access opening. And if they don't have an access opening because you didn't place it, then you can start to kind of hem and haw whether you want to do this or not. Because then there's a certain amount of liability you're taking on by taking that crown off of. But making an access opening in a tooth is actually pretty darn easy. Most of the time it's very easy. Every once in a while there's some funky implants out there that you get inside of and you're like, I really shouldn't have done this. But the most of the time they are very straightforward. You just find what should be the absolute middle where the implant's coming, vertically out through the crown. Just make a hole inside of it. So part of that, and you probably know this already, but this goes into then filling your access opening, would be the fact that you would want to put Teflon down into the access opening. So we always use Teflon. We do not use a cotton pellet. Cotton pellets, man, if there's any kind of leakage at all, they will get funky and disgusting. I mean, just really, really bad stuff. So when I first started, I did use cotton pellets, and then I found out about Teflon, and I'm just like, Teflon, baby. So you just take a little bit of Teflon and you put it down there, and you don't need to jam it down in there. So many times the assistants want to just jam Teflon down in there, and that's not what needs to be done. It just needs to be lightly in there. And the reason you don't really even want them jamming it in there is because if you ever have to go get that back out, it literally, you can drill out the composite that we're going to talk about that you put over the top of it in just a couple of moments. It's the teasing out of the Teflon that can take the longest. And if they jam it really far down into that access opening, I mean, you'd be amazed how long it can take to get out sometimes. So just lightly packed in there. And then I don't even use etch and bond. All you just need is a little bit of flow, wipe it with your finger off the top, and cure it. And that's it. You filled your access opening. And so that'd be the same thing you would do as if you created an access opening and you had to go into another implant. You just drill out the hole, get out the piece of cotton or Teflon that's in there, and then put Teflon back in there, a little bit of flow, and off you go. That's all you need to do. Pretty darn simple to do. So that is another safety feature for you. Another safety feature is that every one of our patients that gets an implant or a graft leaves the office with a bottle of chlorhexidine. I mean, here it's great because what we tell them to do is you pour just a little bit into a cap. They're not swishing it with it. They pour a little bit into a cap, and you actually take a Q-tip and you just kind of dab it around the site. So you get a little bit, stick it in the cap, dab around the site. So we want to keep this thing as bacterial free as possible, and that chlorhexidine is going to do that. Oh, and by the way, you're going to charge $25 for the bottle. Now, if they got an extraction and a graft from us, and then they're going to get the implant, they almost assuredly have some left over. So we'll really only charge them once unless they say they threw it out or something like that, because most of them aren't going to use it to swish and rinse their mouth out with. I don't know why, but they normally have it left over. So you don't need to charge them twice for it because they still got it, but they need to have it. So all of a sudden, here are some things that you're doing. You're adding on chlorhexidine, you're adding on the night guard to it, but they're getting a very knowledgeable dentist about things that are helping them prevent problems with their implant. They're just paying for them, but you're helping them at the same time. Okay, but these are things you can be doing to be able to get some more revenue when you're doing these procedures. Okay, so we did the night guards. I talked in my previous podcast about the nuggets of I do not block. So we don't block for our implants. I just infiltrate around it. And I won't go back through that again other than really quickly of just saying I just do a little bit on the buccal, a little bit in the lingual, and that's it. You especially don't want to do that. You especially don't want to be, putting a block on the lower teeth because you want to know if you're somehow close to the nerve. If you put just a tiny, I use half of a cartridge to place an implant. That's it. Put about a quarter of a cartridge on the buccal, a quarter on the lingual. That is all. That is it. And patients freak out about it too. They freak out about it because it's like, I can't believe you gave me so little anesthetic. And I start like that. We give a little bit, and I wait, I shoot some quick story with them, and that's it. We're rolling. And every time, and I shouldn't say every time, so many times they think, there's no way this is numb yet. But numbing tissue, which is what you're doing because there's no sensory nerves in the bone, you're just numbing the tissue. Gums go to sleep in instants. It's pretty much instantaneous that they'll go to sleep. So you can get rolling right away. And then I also talked about the idea, I think just in the previous podcast, about the fact that ideally, in a real ideal world, 2-step surgeries probably work better than a 1-step surgery where you actually maybe lay a flap, place your implant, let it sit for those 3 months, and then come back and uncover it. And I would actually think that there is a higher success rate in doing that. And so if you want to do that, knock yourself out. Having said that, I don't know how much more successful it has been, but I do know that doing the one stage where you put a healing abutment on top of the implant after you've placed the implant, as long as you've gotten some torque out of it, it saves so much time. And these things just integrate. They do. If you're nice, and we're going to talk about a way to be nice while you're placing your implant, if you're nice to the bone's going to take it. I have placed all sorts of different implants. I've placed minis, I've placed Bicons, I've placed MIS, I've placed Straumann. Right now, I'm using the tapered screw vent from Zimmer. It's a brand name implant. It works. No one can knock it. If you want to say is Straumann's better, go for it. Awesome. You're also going to pay more than 3 times the amount for your Straumann that I am going to pay for my Zimmer. So if you want to do it, awesome. Knock yourself out. You want to use Implant Direct? Awesome. Go for it. I use Implant Direct as well. These things work. It's significantly more about the actual placement and the surgery of your implant than it is about the type of implant that you're placing. So don't get all caught up in that. Don't get caught up in the marketing. Don't get caught up in what these people are, if a salesperson comes in and talks to you about all this stuff. They work. They all work. That's why they're all FDA cleared to work. It's because they work. So don't be a brand snob about this, okay? I've had lots of periodontists and surgeons talk to me about, when I was placing MIS or Implant Direct implants. But guess what? I also saw a bunch of surgeons placing Implant Direct implants as well. And it's hilarious because they're charging maybe even twice what I'm charging to do all this. And the patient's not getting anything better. They're getting someone who understands the surgical process. That's what they're paying more. But that's what I'm here to teach you. All these things that you can do so you can be on the level of a periodontist, so you can place your implant, you can charge whatever you want for it. You deserve it. If you're going to be held to the standard of a specialist, charge what the specialist charges. You are expected to do this as well. But that's why I kind of said, those training wheels to start with of using a guide. Guided implants are very, very easy, okay? But what happens if you want to get after this and you say, okay, well, I like the guided idea. I've done some guided implants. Now tell me what I can do about freehanding them. Well, I still tissue punch. And about the tissue punches, you want to make sure that you've got a sharp tissue punch. These burrs are actually more expensive than I would like for them to be. Every time I look at them, I was like, how can they be that much? But it is so much easier to get a nice tissue punch with a nice sharp burr than it is with a dull one, okay? Because what we're doing is we're scoring down to the bone, okay? That's what we're doing. And ultimately, what happens is we want to go down. Sorry, there's some people that are going to walk to my door and make a lot of noise in just a second. Sorry. So you're going to get down to the bone and you're going to actually push and tell the patient you're going to push. I'm going to push for just a moment so that you're getting a nice score all the way down to the bone. And that way, when you do that, you're able to make sure you have something that's easy to get out. So you can grab your little periosteo, okay, and you just pop this thing out. I mean, it's great. I mean, you just pop the thing out, and if you can't pop it out pretty easily, it means you haven't scored well enough. And you can always just take the handpiece, go back, and go around it again. So I do this without water. I run it about 1,000 RPM, and I just get my nice little plug of tissue and pop it out. And when you're done, look at it. Does that look like where the center of it is where you want to go for your implant? And sometimes you're going to screw it up and it's not going to be exactly where you want it to be. You can either do a little bit more tissue punch, say you want to move it to the mesial. So let's tissue punch a little bit more to the mesial then. And now look at it. Is the center of whatever this thing is that I'm doing, is this now where I want my implant to go? Because you want it pretty much equal distance between the tooth in the front of it and the tooth behind it. And obviously if there's no tooth behind it, then you kind of have to just look at it. Is this about where the tooth should be occluding with the tooth above? So don't be afraid of even marking this. After you get them numb, have the patient bite together and look about where the tooth should be, and just take like a sharp instrument. I always, in my surgical packs, I've always got a root tip pick. That's for the extractions, but it's also for, I use it at the start of my grafts, and we'll go about that in another nugget episode. But you've marked this thing now, and you just put your tissue punch directly over the top of it, and it should be right where you want it to be. And so off you go. You got this little plug of tissue, you pop it out, and now you're ready to go. So, it's so simple compared to the idea of needing to flap, which if you haven't done a bunch of surgery, then you're not going to be as comfortable flapping yet. I mean, you need to get comfortable flapping, but as far as placing implants, you don't need to know how to flap, because then the other thing that it brings into is not only do you need to take the time to flap, which takes more time, now you need to suture when you're done. And it's all about that. That's when I talk about being able to do these things in 5 to 10 minutes. That's where it comes from. Because if you're going to punch, okay, great. Now you've punched. You're going to have a pilot drill that you put down. You're going to take an x-ray after you do your pilot to make sure you're happy with your angulation. And then you basically have 2 more drills after that, and you're placing your implant. That's it. You're rolling right through this thing. That's why they're so easy to do. And that's why, again, if you start with the guided is going to have, your guide kit's going to have the punch. You punch, and you roll through like 3 drills, and that's it. You're placing your implant. That's why these things take just a couple minutes to do, especially once you get the hang of it. They're just very, very straightforward to do. There's just no 2 ways about it. So we punched. When you are, I said this, it's more about the actual technique that you use while you're making your osteotomy than it is the actual type of implant that you're using. So when you are doing your osteotomy, I want to see you kind of pumping the twist drills up and down, okay? Because what's happening is what we're trying to do is we're trying to not overheat the bone. That's what you're trying to do. So if you just slam your burr down in there, it's harder for the irrigation to get down into your osteotomy. If you're moving your burr up and down, your drill up and down, while you're doing your osteotomy, more irrigation is going to get down there to cool the bone. So we're cooling the bone, you're being nice to it, and you want to drop down. So you can do the smaller drills at 1,000 RPM, but then, as I talk about in the book, you're going to want to be able to drop the RPMs then as you go to bigger drills. The bigger drill you get, the more friction you get, the more friction you get, the more heat you get, the meaner you are to the bone. Okay? And I told you in the other podcast about placing Bicon implants, there's no water at all, but we're running that sucker at 75 RPM. So like we're dropping it way down there, essentially almost to a similar speed as when you would actually be torquing your implant into place if you use the handpiece. So it's so slow. So if you're going really slow, you don't have nearly as much friction building up. And again, less heat. So those are some really good takeaways for you today, some things to think about. We want to make sure that we kind of have a rhythmic motion. You don't want to just jam your frickin' drill down into the osteotomy and expect that to be nice to the bone. Be nice to it. Love the bone. If you love the bone and you're nice to it, you'll have a great result. And if you're not overstressing the bone, it's going to be happy, which also has to do with torque values. Now, some of these implant systems out there have a very, very aggressive screw thread to them. And so the Zimmer implants don't have nearly as an aggressive of thread, and so you can just torque that sucker because it's not going to be too overly aggressive to that bone, versus some of the other companies out there that specifically talk about getting primary stability. And in some cases, that's really good. If you're doing like all on X or an immediate implant, which is not what we're talking about right now, you can get to there, and you will absolutely be able to get to there, and I encourage you to get to there, but that's not what we're talking about right now. So right now, what we're talking about is an area that's either been grafted or has just been native bone for a number of years now, and you're just making an osteotomy and you're just torquing this thing into place. Zimmer makes it so much easier with that because you're not going to have that aggressive screw thread, which is going to be nicer to the bone. But there are areas and times you're going to want to be extra aggressive. Like you're going to want something that grabs the hell out of that bone because it sucks that there's just bone out there that's ridiculously soft. And you'll know what I mean someday when you get to it. But that Zimmer is so much nicer to the bone. And again, that's why I have so little in the form of failures is that you've got this nice rhythmic motion, you're being nice to the bone, irrigating it, and you can't over torque it. I mean, I guess you can, but I just don't see any difference in my success rates compared to whatever the world average is. So keep that in mind. So that's why I recommend using the Zimmer to start out with. Start out with the guided kit, start out punching so you're not having to worry about sutures and all that crap, laying a flap, blah, 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 and protect your implant with a night guard. Get them some chlorhexidine so we can make sure we keep a nice, clean surgical field afterwards. And we go from there. Okay? So hopefully you picked up a couple of nuggets here today, some pearls that you can take with you on your implant journey and making you one step closer to become a super GP, all right? Head over to titaniumpractice.com, get signed up for the Insider newsletter if you haven't done so already, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye.
You've been listening to the Titanium Practice Podcast with your host, Dr. Stephen Freeman. Please hit the like and subscribe button and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Titanium Practice. Questions or comments? Send an email to info@titaniumpractice.com. Join us next time to help turn your average practice into a titanium practice.